evening, everyone. It's me, Elliot Serrano, Chicago's King of Geeks. And I just realized that I've been streaming video this whole time and didn't go live. You guys haven't seen anything that I've been showing you for the past 2 minutes. So, hey, let's just jump in. Let's bring in the rest of the MCU ReVU crew. First off, with the regular host of Caffeinated Comics, he is John Clark. How you doing, John?
I saw it.
You saw it. We could see it. Everybody in the green room could see it. But I never hit go live on our studio, on our virtual studio. So I'm going, oh, this sounds so good. It looks so nice. I did the countdown. I think people were they're waiting. Like we were supposed to go live minutes ago. We were live to us, but not to everyone.
Yeah, well, to be fair, you were showing a teaser trailer, and that was supposed to build anticipation.
Supposed to build anticipation for a movie that came out years ago.
Yeah,
maybe you know what? Let's focus on the talk, and maybe not so much video since this is going to be a podcast anyway. Hey. Speaking of podcasts, this is also my, in addition to John Clark, who's a regular host of Caffeinated Comics, my co-host on Shaken Not Heard, the show that gave birth to MCU ReVU, as well as Top Man, Dave Pinner. How you doing, Dave?
I'm pretty good. How are you guys?
Good. And here's the thing. You and I don't talk as often as we did before.
That's true. It's a shame.
That is a shame. But hey, how are you? How are things?
Pretty good. Hanging in there.
Good. Because normally when I would ask you that on the show previously, I would already know the answer to that question.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
I do not know it now. Such is life. And then finally, bringing into the mix is our resident mixologist who comes up with a themed drink for every movie in the MCU ReVU, Thomas Jettner. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
Well, okay, so I haven't talked to Dave in a while. John, actually, I talked to John a little bit more recently because I've been doing caffeine.
You asked me for a short round figure, and then you found it. So that's pretty much the level of our conversation.
Yeah, well, that's about
very on brand.
And then, and I know you, Tom, were trying to get the drink for this week in our hands, and none of us was able. I think, Dave, were you able to get a hold of it?
Yes, I was.
Yes, he
was. Very nice. So hold on. Wait, no, forget that. There's some silly stuff going on with our live feed here. All right. So anyway, for those who are just tuning in, who have not seen this show before, the MCU ReVU is a retrospective of all the films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, starting with Iron Man. And we have made it through the MCU ReVU has been going on for a little over a year now, and we've made it past Avengers Endgame, and we are now entering Phase 4. Right? This is Phase 4.
This is still Phase 3.
Still Phase 3. The movie we're going to talk about today, Spider-Man: Far From Home, is what is called the epilogue of Phase 3. It's like it comes after Avengers Endgame. In fact, if you look up the trailer for Spider-Man: Far From Home, you'll even have Tom Holland in the beginning saying, "Hey, if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame yet, don't watch this because there are a lot of spoilers." And Tom Holland, who's famous for, unfortunately, spoiling things from time to time during his press. But yes, this has been a while back. We've been out for a bit, and what we do here on the MCU is each panel member tries to watch the movie, a day or few before coming back on and taking their most recent viewing of a particular film and comparing it to the very first time. Did the movie hold up? Did it not hold up as well? Was it better? Was it worse? Because I think what we find with a lot of these films is we tend to elevate and denigrate unfairly over time. So we're with the MCU ReVU, we're trying to give it.
Somebody have a window open or something? It's like a swooshing sound every time.
Not me. So I hear like a.
Is that me? Is that my mic or something like that, or is that my
mic?
I thought it was coming from Elliot.
Is it? But I have no microphone.
Is it?
Your window. I don't know.
I'm-
Anyway, if you're just watching us for the first time, that's how the show works. And thank you so much if you're watching us on Facebook Live, YouTube streaming, or Twitch. Thank you to our regular viewers. Susan, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Yes, I know you guys were waiting. Apologies. We had something very similar happen with Whiskey and a Cookie, I believe, last weekend, where there were some technical issues. So if you haven't been watching the Patty Vasquez show, this tends to be run-of-the-mill, but we get over it. Anyway, this show streams live on all our different platforms as well as on the Radio Misfits podcast network later on as part of the Caffeinated Comics series. So if you missed the live stream, you can always watch our videos as part of the archive on the Facebook page and on the YouTube page, or always you can ask your smart speaker, Alexa, play. I can't say that out loud, but it's smart speaker, play.
I'm having trouble hearing.
Yes, I know.
Can
I'm
you
sorry.
say that again?
No, that's okay, Alexa. Don't mind. Never mind.
I'm having the same problem. I got one for Prime Day. I put it right next to the TV, and I changed the name to computer, and now it has discussions with Star Trek.
Star Trek. There we go. Right. Okay.
Literally yesterday was like armed photon torpedoes. I don't know that.
So
Thank God it answered. It didn't know that.
Yeah.
So, in other words, insert name of smart speaker and ask it to play Caffeinated Comics on Radio Misfits. And then you'll get not only Caffeinated Comics and the MCU review, but Top Men and Indiana Jones podcast, where we finished the Indiana Jones series with Dial of Destiny. So we're jumping into Spider-Man Far From Home. It's the second of the Spider-Man series that takes place within the MCU, not to be confused with the Sam Raimi or the Andrew Garfield. You know, it's funny. It just occurred to me. I call it the Sam Raimi films, but not the Tobey Maguire ones. And
I think it's because Mark Webb is not as well known as Andrew Garfield, whereas Sam Raimi is more well known than Tobey Maguire. I do the same thing.
yeah,
I call it the Raimi trilogy the same way I call the Michael Keaton movies the Burton films.
The Burton film. Very good. So I would say what? Okay, now Burton films, not Burton trilogy, because there was no trilogy.
No, you made two.
Right. Anywho, anyway, so at this point, for those who've never watched before, we do lead off our discussion with, where are you, darn it, with what we call our 2-minute MCU movie review. And that's when each of our panelists will discuss their viewing of the film. If they were able to watch it most recently, wonderful. If not, how they felt about it the first time. And I want to start with the biggest Spider-Man fan on the show. That would be you, John.
I did watch it today. I watched it a couple of hours ago. And I wasn't going to because it was really fresh in my mind. And then I realized once I got into it, I was like, I'll watch a little bit to refresh my memory and watch the whole thing in one sitting. It's really entertaining. I think it's the least classic Spider-Man movie ever made. It touches almost nothing on the mythology. There's no Manhattan. There's no supervillains. It takes place in Europe. It's very high school, and yet it's great. It really works because it keeps subverting you. I mean, as you said, I'm an old Spider-Man fan. So when they announced Mysterio was going to be a major character, I was like, well, he's the villain. And even I was wavering because this takes so many chances. There's a moment where I'm like, well, maybe Mysterio's not a villain in the MCU. And it set me up for that sucker punch because it wasn't doing what I want it to do all the time. What the Sam Raimi movies do is like repeat the beats of the comic. Like I love the comic and I want to see a sick Aunt May. I want to see him selling pictures of the Daily Bugle. I want to see him lonely. I want to see him jumping around Manhattan. There's absolutely none of that in here. And it's still completely entertaining. And it's interesting. We mentioned this as an epilogue to the MCU. And as I was watching it, I felt like it was very much a reaction to the other Spider-Man movies. Because this has a foot in both worlds. It's an MCU film but it's also acknowledging the franchise, and obviously in the next Spider-Man, it's going to go way beyond. But Homecoming was all about the things they wouldn't do, the things that have become tropes in Spider-Man. And here it's like the slow re-embracing of things, like the long web swinging shot across Manhattan. They wouldn't do that in Homecoming, and we ended with here. J. Jonah Jameson, they wouldn't do that. We ended it here. So it's a movie that like takes chances and is comfortable taking less chances than Homecoming, and I find it fascinating.
Dave.
Yeah, so I rewatched this one yesterday afternoon, and yeah, John took a lot of the words out of my mouth. I think it's a fun movie. Like he said, it's different from most other Spider-Man movies. I like it as a sort of change of pace from the last couple, I guess, MCU films, because it feels sort of like a smaller story, even though there's a little bit of I guess globetrotting in the sense that you leave New York, but it's not like they're it's going from one place to another place to another place. But it's a smaller group of characters. It's not, you don't have a bunch of different Avengers characters showing up other than Nick Fury, of course. And it's you could focus more on these smaller groups of characters, and especially I think Mysterio is a great villain, and I think they make a lot of really great use out of him when it's only basically one sort of villain that they're focusing on rather than a bunch like in the Avengers films. And there's a bunch of, there's some funny moments in this. The thing that got me was when the one teacher is trying to take a selfie on the bridge, and then he pulls it off and he's looking at it, and then he just drops the camera out of nowhere. Nothing prompts him. He just completely loses his grip and drops it into the water. I love that JB Smoove is in this as well. Probably best known as playing Leon in Curb Your Enthusiasm. And one thing another stray observation I had is I briefly walked out of the room into the kitchen to grab something while I was watching this movie. And it was right before Jake Gyllenhaal makes his first appearance, other than like that very opening scene. And I was telling Tom when I saw him earlier today, I didn't realize how much Jake Gyllenhaal sounds like Paul Rudd. So I was thinking, does Ant-Man have a cameo in this that I had completely forgotten about? The unexpected Avengers cameo? No, they just have a very similar speaking voice. So that was just another totally random observation I made. I will say it's probably of the three Tom Holland Spider-Man films, probably the one I enjoy the least, but I also still really enjoy it. So it's not like I think poorly of this film in any way. I love Homecoming, and I also really like No Way Home. So this just falls, just a little short of those two. But I think taken as a whole, those three together, it's a really strong trilogy.
So you would say Far From Home is the Temple of Doom of the Spider-Man movies?
I suppose, yes. Yeah.
And I really shouldn't bring up Temple of Doom before segueing to Tom Chetner.
What would be one of our podcasts without bringing that up?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I'm gonna flog that one.
Oh yeah, beat that horse until it's dead in the ground. So I have no problem with that. Okay, is it my turn? I guess it's my turn. So this is the bridge movie in the MCU or at least it was supposed to be the bridge movie to the post Iron Man, post Captain America setup. And it's literally a bridge movie. We have the Charles Bridge in Prague, we have the Rialto Bridge in Venice, and we have the Tower Bridge in London. So almost all of some kind of major event happens on a bridge in every part of this movie that they go to. And this movie there's a big questions like who's going to take over for Iron Man? Who's going to fill Tony Stark's shoes? Who's going to be in this central place in the MCU? And that wound up leaving me feeling different this time around because of how much the pandemic affected where the MCU was going to go, what directions it was going to take, what the production values were going to be going forward. This movie came out in July of 2019, and we did not get another MCU movie until well after March of 2020, when the entire world went on lockdown. So it's interesting in the sense of what you can kind of see off in the distance where they were going to go or where they wanted to go. And maybe we didn't quite reach those shores, but it's interesting as a historical artifact in that sense. As far as the movie itself, I had a great time watching it. I enjoyed it the first time around. I enjoyed it again the second time around. I found a lot of it in common, I think, with Iron Man 3, in that you do get the focus grouped villain who's made up of component parts, but instead of component parts of different villainous or evil personas, you get component parts of different heroes. You can just tell that Mysterio's armor is it's Thor's armor mixed with Iron Man's armor, that the whole story is very much the same. He's even like an intergalactic cop like Captain Marvel. So the way that it's set up is very similar. You get that same misdirection. I also found Mysterio to be the most bloodthirsty villain we've seen in quite a while, in terms of his casual ruthlessness regarding other people's lives and how much property damage and how many bodies he probably stacked up, all because Tony Stark gave his project a dumb name. So I found him to be, a real dick. But the thing that is always good about that, and the thing that I'll always come back to with this movie, is just how cute Peter and MJ are. It's very adorable, and it seems very high school and awkward the way high school romances are, and the way that Spider-Man hasn't always been. So that's always fun to see. So that's my summary.
And you did make a drink, correct, for today's show?
Yes, I did. So we found ourselves in Venice again. We were just in Venice not too long ago for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So I basically did a tiramisu in a glass. And tiramisu was invented in another city, Treviso, which is another city in the Venice region, the Veneto. And this drink went through about 4 different variations. I think I told Dave I had come up with a 5th after I met up with him earlier today.
I have a feeling if you had handed me the mixed cocktail as you were coming up with this new idea, you would have taken it back.
Well, sometimes you just have to stop and go with your best idea that you have, and I think this one turned out pretty okay. And it's effectively it's a variation on an espresso martini, but in emulating the lady fingers that you get in a tiramisu, you have egg white and you have vanilla syrup that goes in there to add a little sweetness and savoriness on top of the coffee and the chocolate and the brandy in this case. So, Dave, you're drinking it. What is your taste profile here?
It is, well, it's everything you just described. It's very different from any other cocktail you've done so far to this point. So I know there were a couple. I think the last episode, or maybe it was when we were doing Dial of Destiny, and we're trying to rank those 5 drinks, and they're all delicious. I don't mean this as a criticism, but I was having a hard time remembering like which one was which from the first couple. This though is very distinctive. Like I said, it's because, like you said, it's an espresso. It's a variation similar to an espresso martini. It's very different from anything you've done. It's very tasty, very good.
I thought the ingredient list is, if anyone wants to make this at home, is pretty straightforward. It's brandy, espresso, vanilla syrup, and egg white. And if you don't have chocolate bitters, you can use just a little of that powdered cocoa powder to go over the top of it. That's what I'm doing tonight. So,
and you can see, if you're watching the live stream, there is the drink in question, as well as in the hands of Dave and Tom. You can always go to ReVU Cocktails. That's ReVU Cocktails on Instagram to see all of Tom's concoctions, all his drinks, recipes, as well as a couple extra things here and there. Tom has also made drinks for our Indiana Jones podcast. And did you do one? No. We just talked about the drinks of James Bond when we had you on for Shaken Not Heard. So
right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want me to throw a Vesper up there at some point, I will.
You can always do that. But again, all the cocktails and directions, recipes on how to make your own can be found on the Instagram app at ReVU Cocktails. So if you haven't had a chance to see all the different drinks, just visit that account. Give it a follow. Give each of those cocktails, the ones that you like, give them a heart and share. And let us know when you try them out. Let us know what you think. Because so far, Tom, you have yet to make one that I haven't just flipped for. And it's always fun to be able to get those from you, like
it's always fun to kind of handing them off because it's I have to figure out how to transport it and what ingredients to leave out because they maybe aren't necessarily shelf stable. I still have a blue crystal sour sitting in the fridge at work. If John ever wants to retrieve it, he's going to have to let me know. The shelf life on that is fairly infinite, but I don't think it is infinite. So, but I did have my with that one actually. My brother saw it on Instagram. He asked me to make that for him. He seemed to enjoy that one a lot. So,
mine is still sitting in the fridge. So that one I'm waiting. I mean, I've been drowning my sorrows for the past few weeks, so I'm a bit hit that one next.
It makes a good Romulan ale substitute. So if you're watching some Star Trek, that might be a good idea.
Well, that'll be the next podcast.
That'll be the next podcast.
There has been discussion. Yes, there has been discussion. I want to tease it here. We're trying to figure out a new angle on Star Trek because there's so many out there. But we're thinking, let's just talk about the bad Star Trek movies. I don't know. We'll start with Final Frontier and work our way around.
I was going to add, by the way, this drink is delicious enough to justify the fact that I'm drinking espresso at 7:30 in the evening. I'm probably going to regret tomorrow morning, but that's worth it.
Well, I don't have that problem.
Oh, I have that problem. I can't even drink a Diet Pepsi now.
All right. So again, ReVU Cocktails. Just find all of those drinks and those recipes. As for my 2-minute review, I will say this. I just finished watching it before we came on air, and it highlighted 2 issues. Couldn't frickin' get the movie on streaming. I had to pull up my old Blu-ray. I had the Blu-ray to watch it on because it is not on Disney Plus. Far From Home and No Way Home are on Stars, if you can believe that. The only one that you can find on Disney Plus right now is Homecoming.
Yeah, this is why I'm going to have to buy Across the Spider-Verse. First of all, to be able to hear it, because I was in one of those early screenings where the dialogue was washed out. But also because of the Sony Disney thing. Mm-hmm. And, Sony tried Crackle, but that never took off. They don't really have a streaming platform on their own. So it's just going to kind of float around.
Didn't they add the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films to
Disney? They did very recently. Before then, they were on Netflix. So there's like certain films that aren't really tied to it.
They're still on Netflix.
Are they? Then they're on both. They're on Disney Plus and Netflix.
Yeah, that's possible because you've got Suits right now on Netflix and Hulu. So the Indiana Jones movies too are on Paramount Plus and Disney Plus. So right now there's this weird thing where you can find some things split up, some series split up on different platforms, and some things showing up on multiple platforms.
Yeah, my favorite was when Paramount Plus named themselves as the only home of Star Trek, and they pulled all the series off every streaming platform, and they started creating new series. And then about 3 months ago, they put half the movies on Hulu.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Yeah. That shit makes no sense. But anyway, Polar Knights, thank you yet again for commenting. Perfect evolution of beard growth. Yes. So we've got Tom starting. Well, Dave's got his Magnum PI mustache. Tom's got a little stubble growing in
I have
there.
my weekend growth before I have to go to court tomorrow.
There you go. John, of course, you can't really tell, but he has a little full. It's fuller, but a lot of it's
getting
gray.
whiter by the week,
Yeah.
and my skin has been this white forever.
Yeah. And then
I'm going monochromatic. I'm going to be a television show in the 50s by the next episode.
maybe I'll just.
So if you see me in a skinny tie and smoking a cigarette, that's why.
That might be a good theme for. I'm sure we'll do that for WandaVision, maybe.
There you go.
There you go.
60s television at that point.
Well, what do we all dress as a different decade for that?
There you go.
Okay, I'm calling the late 1800s. Again, my beard is going to be
a decade that was in WandaVision.
All right. But beyond my issues trying to find the movie and having to watch the movie on my laptop computer because my Blu-ray decided to die, I was reminded of that great sequence with Mysterio pretty much screwing with Peter's head. With that multiple sequence where Peter's trying to catch Mysterio, but Mysterio's throwing all these different illusions at him, and one after another. And that reminded me of the Spider-Man animated series where they did something like that, but on a much not as ambitious level. I mean, but I was going on. Now that's
maybe the '90s one, Elliot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is something that this Mysterio. That's what makes him such a cool villain. In the
90s. Now I remember that. In the 90s, he snuck up on Mysterio, turned him over, lifted up his fishbowl head, and Mysterio was a werewolf. So yeah, not quite the level of the Iron Man.
But screwing with Peter's head. Still. Yeah. And also to comment that the CGI in this one holds up really well, too.
Really well, except for some reason, maybe it was my screen or just what I was paying attention to, the fire looked very CG. I don't know why. I kept looking at the fire. I was like, well, that doesn't look good. Especially like on Tower Bridge where there were like little fires.
Oh, yeah.
But you're right. It's certainly better than what it is now because the MCU has stretched the effects houses so thin.
Which are now unionizing apparently too.
Yes.
Good.
So that's going to make it. We'll see how that goes. So, and then of course, Jake Gyllenhaal, who, for folks who might not have been aware, Jake Gyllenhaal, when Tobey Maguire was holding out after the first Spider-Man to say, "Look, I'm not going to do this anymore unless you raise my my pay rate a bit." Sony said, "Okay, fine. We're just bringing in Jake Gyllenhaal. He'll be Spider-Man from now on." They were, boom. And so he said, "Oh, no, okay, I can play Spider-Man. I'll do that. I'll do it." And which makes you go, "Wow, that's." You look at Jake Gyllenhaal now, the road not taken. Who knows?
Yeah, I love that. The MCU likes that meta casting every now and then. It's like making Michael Keaton the Vulture, or making Chris Evans and Michael B. Jordan Killmonger and Captain America because they were both Human Torch. But I love there's almost a meta commentary is that Mysterio is not only a fake superhero, he was a fake Spider-Man and a fake role model for Peter because Peter looks to him as a father figure. And this is somebody who literally for a minute was an older Spider-Man.
And I have to keep reminding myself because as I was watching this, Peter had to go, "Look, I'm just a 16-year-old kid." I'm like, okay, all right, good. Okay. Please, thank you for reminding me that he's 16 because that's the only way I can fathom him just being so he struggles like a 16-year-old kid would. I mean,
he struggles like Peter Parker would too.
Peter Parker would.
Peter Parker does not have the answers. That's one of the reasons I like him. That's one of the reasons he's not Batman.
Oh yeah, but you'll know. Remember, there were all these criticisms of how Peter Parker behaved in No Way Home, which we'll talk about the next time around. And there are a lot of little plot thingies that you just had to chalk up to Pete just being a teenage kid who has all this stuff heaped on him, and that he's just figuring out things the way a 16-year-old would, given all that. So I was like, okay, you know what? I got to remember that. But again, to echo all you guys, very Spider-Man. I mean, I feel like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU Sony films are the most Spidey of the live action films, with the exception of, I say, the Spider-Man 2 with Sam Raimi's. And
yeah, and No Way Home is a kind of a love letter to their franchise. So it's like it's very Spidey in very different ways.
Yeah.
In the same way that the Spider-Verse films are very true to Spider-Man while being so many variations on the character.
And the Spider-Verse films are really the best of all of them, I would say. They're the most fun.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I was realizing this watching it again. Dave, like you said, it's like this is the one that I enjoy the least, but it's good. And I had always chalked it up to, well, it's too different. It's not getting the classic Spider-Man. It's it's this road movie. They're taking so many chances. But then I realized I forgot this came out in 2019, Tom, as you said, right before the pandemic. But it also came out 6 months after Spider-Verse, and I think that might have lowered my expectations a little bit, because it's not as good as Into the Spider-Verse, because honestly, there aren't many animated movies that are as good as Into the Spider-Verse.
There aren't many movies, period, as good as Into the Spider-Verse. So that's like...
Yeah, so then to get into live-action Spider-Man movie that's good, I think that made it forgettable. But really, there's a lot of weight in this movie, and there's a lot of great things. This movie does nothing wrong. It's just not Spider-Verse.
All right, let's go a little bit deeper. And we've gotten our overviews, but what else? What else about this film? Let's consider how the movies were from when they first premiered and to now. And Tom, you made a really good point about this was the last MCU movie before the pandemic, and after that we would get series. I mean, WandaVision would come out. For at this point, Marvel would start leaning into the Disney Plus series. We
would also get Black Widow, which was supposed to be a movie, as a
Right.
Disney Plus movie. So which kind of adds to Disney Plus being the dominant factor.
And it changed the whole schedule, because we didn't get any feature like even Black Widow came out in 2021. Like that was delayed for a good solid year.
I think Eternals is the next movie. I was trying to remember the timeline, because things don't go sequentially anymore.
I think it went Black Widow and then Eternals.
Yeah.
In terms of release, I think it went Black Widow and then Eternals, which are both. I mean, one is essentially a flashback, and the other one is way different from anything we'd seen previously. So, I mean, one thing about watching this movie, and also one thing we can talk about in one sense, is the corporate relationship between Sony and Disney is, in terms of the characters, a little bit different now. I understand that Sony might be trying to do its own thing again, which is maybe not. Did the chief of Sony put out saying Spider-Man is in good hands, our hands, or something like that? And
yeah, I think. They're always trying to break it because of the money, but
right.
And this is also a problem right now, is that Sony went to Marvel after the Andrew Garfield movies started to tank, but the best and worst thing that happened to Sony was after they joined the MCU and did Homecoming, they put out Venom, which is not a great movie, but made a ton of money.
Yeah.
And then Spider-Verse, which made a ton of money and won an Oscar.
Yeah.
So Sony's still walking around like, no, we got it. We got Spider-Man. They kind of want Disney to go away. And from what I've heard, the agreement is that any live-action Peter Parker movie has to star Tom Holland and has to be shared with Disney. And then also every movie they make with Tom Holland, they then have to have, number one, an MCU guest star, and then Tom Holland has to guest star in another movie, which is why these three movies have Iron Man, Nick Fury, and Doctor Strange.
Right.
So it's this push and pull. And yeah, Spider-Verse is great, but Morbius? I mean, they don't know. And has anyone seen the Craven trailer?
I wish I hadn't, but
it's so bad it made me talk like Matthew Perry.
But the you can see from this movie that there was there at the time in 2019 there was a much closer. It looked, at least, because remember that No Way Home was kind of still in the pipeline. You could kind of tell that Peter Parker was going to have a bigger role in the MCU, maybe going forward post Endgame. Maybe not in the Tony Stark position of the, I guess you could say, main character, but critical of like, oh, hey, we've got all these superheroes in New York. Of course, Spider-Man is going to show up at some point. So that's kind of something that, because we know that then later No Way Home goes through a bunch of different rewrites, and they're trying to balance No Way Home with Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. But it seemed at this point like, because it's such a thick, oh God, this burden on Peter Parker's shoulders of carrying on for Tony Stark, which if you think about it in the context of, I'm not that familiar with the comics, but the idea of Peter Parker being Tony Stark in the comics seemed kind of laughable to me.
Yeah, they did a story for about a year where Peter started his own technology firm, and delivered to the story, it fell apart almost immediately, because he then screwed over his own product to save people as Spider-Man, and added that to the character's many failures. So you'll still see today, when J. Jonah Jameson is yelling at Peter Parker, and he's like, and your technology firm was terrible. So they did try it, but they tried it going in knowing it can't happen.
Right.
But that is the Marvel burden, because you feel that, and as we go on, you're just going to feel it more and more of that. Marvel's looking for their central character. And in terms of character recognition and popularity, it is Spider-Man. It's always been Spider-Man, but they don't completely own Spider-Man. So then it was, Chadwick Boseman is fantastic. He can step in his shoes. And then unfortunately, Chadwick Boseman passed away. And then there's like, oh no, it's Paul Rudd. But then Quantumania, we'll get into Quantumania when we get into Quantumania, can't support the weight of the MCU. Ant-Man can't. And then I feel like Benedict Cumberbatch, they like playing in kind of the weird edges. So there's been this desperation to find somebody. And of course, Eternals and then the Disney show, they're just pulling every character they haven't made yet. And they're like, well, maybe you're the center. And then the worst move they made was like, oh, the center will be Kang. And then just from the headlines, that was a risky position. So Marvel's lost its sure footing after Endgame for a variety of reasons. But I think that's one of the main ones, is that most of the people they banked on taking over Robert Downey Jr.'s spot for life reasons haven't worked out.
Well, that's the one thing you could see in this movie, is how very polished it is. I mean, if you've been watching MCU films since the pandemic, we always think, well, what's Marvel going to do after Endgame? It's like, well, no, I think the tone changes after this movie. This movie still feels like it's Endgame in terms of what the MCU was, even if it's an after credit, I guess it's a whole movie of after credit stuff. But did you guys feel like that way? Like this was like kind of like watching a more pre-pandemic MCU movie? I mean, obviously
I did, but I also felt like this is the movie leading into No Way Home, which is an even bigger movie and still has this tone. So even though the MCU starts to drift away from this sure-footed tone, No Way Home is one of those shining beacons. It's almost like the Zack Snyder DCU era, where it was like I would hate a movie, then love one movie. Like Shazam would come out and be like, wow, that was great. And then the next film I would just hate. And I feel like I'm not at the point of hating any Marvel movies. I just don't love them the way I used to. And you can see the seams in ways that you couldn't before. But the next movie I can point to, loving from the MCU, is a Spider-Man movie. So I feel like in some ways, maybe it's because Sony's sharing it with Disney, so it gets more money because they both have to put up the money and they both have to tell the other how much money they're putting up. So they can't cheap out in a She-Hulk kind of way. But I do feel like as we go into this phase 4, the most solid thing is No Way Home, and they'll try to do it again with Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange is good, but man, it gets wobbly because of the amount of stuff they start to place on it.
John, would you know, do the Spider-Verse movies count towards Sony's obligation to make a Spider-Man movie?
No, they can make Spider-Verse. They can make 50 Spider-Verses. They don't have to go to Kevin Feige. It's not part of their agreement. It doesn't count at all because it's an animated movie. And when they announced it as the Miles Morales animated movie. And I remember my reaction was like, all right, this is going to be low budget. He's the secondary Spider-Man character. He's popular, but they don't want to confuse it with Peter Parker. So yeah, we'll do like a kids movie version. But then Spider-Verse turned into what it turned into. So that's all of these things that Sony's doing. Morbius, Kraven. They're supposed to be doing Madam Web. They're trying to make movies out of the villains, which obviously they're making villain movies without Spider-Man, which is really dicey. So, but they can use any character they want in the Marvel Universe except a live action Peter. And maybe that's one of the reasons, and I'm just thinking of this now, maybe that's one of the reasons they've been reticent in the MCU movies to embrace all the Spider-Man mythology. You know, we get J. Jonah Jameson as an Easter egg at the end of this. I mean, he's, I would say, the most important civilian character in Spider-Man, next to Aunt May. You know, we don't have much of the mythology characters, and that's always disappointed me about the MCU because I always felt that Spider-Man had the best civilian characters of any comic. I mean, you go down the line to people like Mary Jane,
we have MJ,
who's completely redone, but Betty Brant, Flash Thompson, Harry Osborn, Norman Osborn, you know, Robbie Robertson. There's so many rich characters that they did not go near in this trilogy. And now I'm wondering out loud, and you guys can agree or disagree with me. I wonder if maybe because they can save those characters for their own movies.
Well, I was reading, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but there was a rumor, I don't know if this was confirmed by anyone or anything, that they want Tom Holland back to do another 3 films.
Oh, they do, yeah. And Tom Holland wants to. It's a money thing, and now it's a strength thing.
And that No Way Home is, they consider, the end of his origin. It's like, which is on one hand, that's a long ass origin, 3 movies. But it's like now we can get maybe in the next Spider-Man 4 or whatever the next film, Spider-Man solo film after No Way Home, with the events of that, how that movie ends. Then they could start to reintroduce some of those elements. Like we get this, if you want to buy that line about this being an origin trilogy, we see a different spin on Spider-Man than we had seen with, you know, the Tobey Maguire films and the Andrew Garfield films that, like you said, ticked all those boxes where you have Aunt May and you have J. Jonah Jameson in a prominent role and all the sort of secondary supporting characters. Now he's more in where, not obviously I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but where things end at the end of No Way Home, he's more in a place where we can kind of maybe get back to the classic Spider-Man, where you can slowly introduce those characters that we haven't had in the first these 3 previous Tom Holland films.
Yeah, I think so. I think these movies are Spider-Man with crutches in terms of mythology. It's like, what if Spider-Man is supported by all of the Disney MCU movies? Yeah. So we have, you know, we have the focus on high school, which is, we've had high school in Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, but we've never stayed there. Like, you know, Tobey graduates high school at the hour mark of Spider-Man 1, and Andrew Garfield is not really in class at all in Spider-Man 2, even though he's supposed to be a high school student. But that's a new spin to do it. But you're right. When we end No Way Home, it's like, okay, we're going to take away the Tony Stark technology. We're going to take away that he's friends with everyone in the Marvel Universe because now they don't know who he is. And that movie ends, and I know it's the next movie, it's not this podcast. That movie ends with Peter sewing a costume and swinging around the city. And I always
the most classic comic Spider-Man suit we've seen in the MCU yet.
Yeah, and my hope is that we get a more grounded one. I would love that to be the platform to really bring Vincent D'Onofrio back to the MCU. I would love like a gangster level Spider-Man story with the Kingpin at the center, and then you can throw in all these villains as henchmen, a lot of the dummies that the guys you haven't used yet, the tarantulas and the shockers and the Silvermanes and the hammerheads. But you could build a story with Kingpin and keep it less sci-fi than these movies have been. And I think that's what it is going in. The last I heard, they were breaking the story, but then writer strike, actor strike.
Yeah.
Didn't our previous MCU review guest DG Chichester say that Kingpin, the Marvel considers Kingpin to be a Daredevil villain now?
Yeah,
I think ever since Frank Miller, but they used him in Hawkeye.
Yeah, but I mean,
we're jumping ahead. So the MCU's used him with characters that don't necessarily go with him. But the Kingpin was created for Spider-Man, and he's still prominent. He's looms a much larger figure in Daredevil because, honestly, to be frank, Daredevil doesn't have a deep bench like Spider-Man does. Spider-Man can give up Kingpin and still have great Green Goblin stories and Dr. Octopus stories and Vulture stories. Daredevil has, Bullseye.
Which is decent. But not.
Yeah, but he doesn't have. His early guys are like the Animan and Stiltman and
Stiltman.
They're not guys you can go back to.
Didn't they use a bunch of B-list bench player Spider-Man villains as the quote unquote elementals in this movie, like Hydro Man,
Molten Man?
Molten Man? Well, wasn't that a B team Spider-Man villain as well?
Yeah, I think so. I was thinking about that as we were talking about it. I think they're Easter eggs more than anything else because the land one looks like Sandman, the water one looks like Hydro Man, the fire one is called the Molten Man, but it's certainly none of those characters. And then the last one is Air, and it's like Spider-Man doesn't really have an air villain. And people were like, the Cyclone. I'm like, that guy was in one issue in 1973. I thought he was a Captain America villain that showed up. It's like, so I think those are Easter eggs, but obviously they're not characters because they're not even real. They're just they're just mysterious holograms.
I remember when this movie was being made and there was all the leaks that were coming out, which I tend to avoid, but for some reason with this movie, I didn't have a ton of self-control. They're like Molten Man, Hydro Man, and people are seeing like the probably concept art in early effects tests. Oh, they're going to have all these, like you said, like B-list villains. And people are like, they're going to have the Sinister Six in this movie. This weird, very like ragtag Sinister Six with all these like B and C list villains. And then John,
you don't even get the Sinister Six in No Way Home. There's 5 villains.
They fell just one short.
And we do get the full Sandman in No Way Home, and Peter's not like, hey, you're like that thing Mysterio made.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they do. Speaking of Easter eggs, I mean, they do drop a little bit of a hint how a possible origin for the Fantastic Four, because the Fantastic Four have been made comparisons have been made to the 4 elements. The Invisible Woman's air, Human Torch of Care is fire, the Thing is earth, and Mr. Fantastic is water. And then there's this bit when the Mysterio. It's talking about the where he came from in the multiverses. Again, also dropping the multiverse there.
This, I believe, is the first mention of the multiverse.
Yeah.
And it's bullshit. But it is the first time the multiverse is mentioned.
It's bullshit. And yet, I mean, he drops 616 universe, which, I was like, wow.
Which is then confirmed in Doctor Strange.
Right. Or that's just something that they stick on because although in Across the Spider-Verse,
Peter B. Parker is 616 and Across this Into the Spider-Verse.
Into the Spider-Verse, but they're saying Miguel O'Hara refers to the Doctor Strange in that nerd in Earth 1999999 or something like that. So, other little bits that are dropped here and there, and of course, also to skip ahead and just to the part that we can talk about a little more. If you want, but I was annoyed at the post-credit reveal where we learned that Maria Hill and
not the J. Jonah Jameson scene.
No, not the J. Jonah Jameson scene. The scene where Maria Hill and Nick Fury have been revealed to actually be Skrulls. the whole time. It was
Talos.
Alice, yeah.
Talos and his wife, right?
Yeah.
And Nick Fury is up in space apparently doing something, which now we get the Secret Invasion, and I go, where was any of the payoff to that?
There's no payoff in Secret Invasion for anyone on any level. Yeah, that is such a waste. I think it's because the real Nick Fury would have seen through Mysterio in a minute.
Maybe
Samuel Jackson is playing the character differently in this.
Yeah.
He's playing it a little behind the beat, and he's taken by surprise a little too often.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was a way to explain the plot logic, but you're right. It also just sets up Secret Invasion, which doesn't really go back to that stuff at all.
Yeah.
It's just all the Secret Invasion pays off is that Nick Fury has been working with Skrulls since Captain Marvel.
Well, we talked about the different Spider-Man supporting civilian characters. We haven't actually mentioned the Peter and MJ part, which is maybe the central part of this, kind of the driving force of the whole movie. And it just seemed large sections of it just seemed very Peter Parker, where he has this idea of getting this necklace in Venice and trying to time it up exactly right, and it gets broken. And it's incredibly well acted when they're on the Charles Bridge in Prague. And she tells him that it's like, oh, you're Spider-Man. And he has like, so the whole time you were watching me because you thought I was Spider-Man, like the drop in the tenor of you could see his heart shatter into a million pieces in just slow motion. That's a credit to both Tom Holland and Zendaya because she plays it very cool. Like, yeah, I was just watching you because you're Spider-Man. And you could just see him just like.
It's like Ralph Wiggum.
Yes, like Ralph. Right, yeah, exactly, Ralph. You can see the exact moment his heart shatters, and then with the because then we go into the Mysterio tech, and then he like you can, and again a credit to Tom Holland and Zendaya for playing this so well. You can see the wheels working in his head, and then he suddenly turns around. He's like, "I am Spider-Man, and I think I really screwed up." It's just like
I love her reaction. She's like, "Really? I was only 67% sure."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and again, that's the MCU. I love their relationship, which of course is a real relationship. And oddly, every live-action Peter and MJ have started a relationship on the set. None of them have lasted, except for Tom Holland and Zendaya. But I love they have a real natural way of talking to each other. And as you were saying before, all the high school kids feel like high school kids in these movies. You know, they don't feel like adults in a high school setting. They're doing dumb things. Like the relationship with Ned and Betty is the dumbest, most adolescent thing I've ever seen. It's because they sit next to each other on a plane. They're in a relationship for 2 weeks. But it is the exact kind of thing that happens.
Those are high school relationships. I had that relationship.
Oh, I once stole my friend's girlfriend on a bus ride back from state championships. You know, I'm still friends with him.
So for folks who might get a little bit frustrated with the films, remember these are meant to be John Hughes films that take place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's what they intend to be. And you keep telling yourself that, you know, if you're like over 30 and expecting anything more, then just check it because, and I think again, we will talk about this film in the future, but that was the one criticism I kept hearing about No Way Home was that Peter Parker acts too much like a kid. I'm like, yeah, because he's a kid. That's the essence. That's what made Peter Parker. That's what made Spider-Man such a popular character when he came out in the comics. He wasn't a millionaire. He wasn't some dude who dressed up as a bat and could intimidate, intimidate the villains that he, or criminals. Half the time when Peter Parker took on one of his enemies, he either had a cold or he had his arm in a sling. And it's like, and I remember reading those issues of Spider-Man going, man, I just wish once Peter could take on the Rhino at full strength. But no, something's always happening to him. It's like It's always the Michael Jordan flu game with Peter Parker.
And that's something that bothers me about these movies is that you don't get a lot of the loser Peter. Like Peter, you don't get that lonely loser Peter who's constantly missing engagements with his friends and missing important moments because he's stopping the Rhino from attacking a bank. And his life gets worse and worse and worse because he's always Spider-Man. We don't see that until No Way Home. And you're right. It just hit me when you were saying Peter's not a millionaire, but these are movies where he can make a call and a Stark jet lands in Holland and makes him a spider armor. It's cool and it's a nice spin on it, but that's never felt quintessentially Spider-Man. Spider-Man is the loser in the bad apartment who's barely making enough of pictures of himself that he knows will be used against him just to make rent. Every time, this is why I love J. Jonah Jameson so much. Every time he goes in and hands those pictures, he's just like, I'm asking you to tell the city I'm a creep. Because he has no other options. He's barely getting by. And by the way, if you're not up on Spider-Man lore, I could talk about J. Jonah Jameson all goddamn day long. But they have now recast J. Jonah Jameson as an alt-right podcaster who I reread the issue, has Spider-Man as a guest, and they argue until the wall explodes.
Oh my! Wait, we're talking about in the comic book now.
In the comic, yeah, it was a Nick Spencer comic.
Oh, Nick Spencer. Okay, I can't see Dan Slott doing that, but okay.
Right. No, it was Chip Zdarsky actually decided that J. Jonah Jameson would find out, but then Nick Spencer followed up with the podcast.
Speaking of interesting developments, yes. If you're watching on the live stream, Dexter has made an appearance. This is the little gremlin of a dog that we always reference at the end of every episode.
Yep.
Right.
He's a goblin, not the green goblin. He's a black goblin, but a goblin nonetheless.
Little goblin, little man. I've met that little guy. He is adorable. All right, John. We haven't done this in a while, but were there any toys?
Oh, there were lots and lots of toys. It was actually hard to choose. As we've been kind of talking about the history of Marvel Legends as we've gone on, the popularity getting bigger and bigger. Obviously, there was a whole set for this with a Build a Molten Man and a Mysterio and several Spider-Mans because he goes through a few costume changes in this. But there were also high-end figures, like there was a Mafex, Japanese import. So the one I chose to do, which I modified just for this, is the Hot Toys 12-inch Mysterio. And for the first time, here's the head I usually use, because this is the display head, which is really cool. Is the fishbowl that lights up. But the reason it's not on the body now is it also comes with a Jake Gyllenhaal.
John, you're muted.
Have I been muted the entire time?
No.
Oh, you know what? Did Jake Gyllenhaal mute me?
Jake Gyllenhaal muted.
He's an egomaniac, I tell you. You know, he's got to double the damage. He needs his cape steamed, and he won't let me talk. But yeah, this one was really, really nice, and obviously, I display him with the fishbowl head because that's the classic one. But yeah, this is a big one, and as we get a No Way Home, not only will we get toys, we're still getting them. So Spider-Man is something that continues to give and give. But you know, we've had Spider-Man toys since the early 70s, and they're just getting better and better and better.
John, can you replace the Jake Gyllenhaal head with a werewolf head?
Yeah.
Great
werewolf head.
Was there a Night Monkey variant? Is my question.
There was a Hot Toys there was a Night Monkey Marvel Legends, and there was a Hot Toys Night Monkey, which I thought was their kind of Easter egg way of doing the black costume because they were using the symbiote in Venom. Well, and Venom's origin has nothing to do with Spider-Man now, but I think it was an excuse to get him in an all-black costume just for those fans, of which I am a big one. What I love about that is all of the products says Spider-Man stealth suit, but everyone calls it Night Monkey.
That's what I'd call it. I want a Night Monkey figure. Night Monkey.
John, do you know if with the whole Sony and Disney arrangement, if they were to hypothetically in one of the next couple Tom Holland Spider-Man films do the symbiote storyline or bring Venom in, do they have to use Tom Hardy's version or can they do their own version?
I don't think they do because they're playing in the multiverse so much, but we had that Venom 2 had an Easter egg scene where Venom crosses into the MCU and sees Tom Holland Spider-Man on television, and that is not paid off in any way whatsoever.
No, it's paid off.
Yeah, he ends up
in No Way
drinking
Home.
with one of the team members on Ted Lasso. That's how it's paid off.
And then we get the single drop of the Venom symbiote sitting there in a bar in Mexico. I'm sure that it's fully capable of making its way to New York.
Right. So, Dave, there could be an MCU Eddie Brock out there who gets it, or a completely different character. I would like Tom Hardy to do it because Tom Hardy's got a luggage bag full of ticks for that character that I haven't seen since Johnny Depp played a pirate. I mean, I thought his Bane was over the top. Oh, I love those movies in spite of myself.
Was this when with No Way Home? I'm sorry, Far From Home. Was this when Tom Holland famously got a little bit inebriated and called Kevin Feige, begging him to like work things out with Sony so that he can continue to be in the MCU? Because I think there was talk of them.
I'm trying to remember that the time that was happening. I wonder if it was before this. I know No Way Home is his last contracted film. But I know talks have broken down several times with Sony and Disney because when you're making movies that make $1 billion, and both studios are thinking they each should get 700, it's not going to be a harmonious relationship.
But Sony has to make a Spider-Man movie at least one every 3 years, if I remember correctly.
Or Disney will get it. I believe the Spider-Verse movies count. They have to put out a movie with Spider-Man's name on it.
So that does count. If they do the Spider-Verse movies, those count towards them keeping the character. Okay.
Yeah, because Peter B. Parker is in all of these films too, so if they really want to argue, which lawyers do.
Okay. Because and I know Tom Holland now says he's taking a vacation from acting in general. And of course also with the strike, no one's doing anything.
Everyone's taking vacation.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about the SAG strike now is there's a reunion of every movie and TV show you want to see because it's always a selfie of the entire cast picketing.
Yeah, and they can't talk about whatever it is that they were on. They can't.
Oh, in fact, several podcasts have shut down.
Yeah,
and other podcasts have had to say we're not allowed to talk about it. I know Terry Matalas was on a Star Trek show, and they really walked around Picard. And, you can talk about your history, but the Always Sunny podcast is not even recording episodes.
I know I listened to this week's Smartless, and they said, well, that episode was recorded prior to the strike. So, but yeah, I think the last Rob Lowe episode I listened to where I think his wife was on. No, who was he talking to? I forget who he was talking to, but he, Craig Ferguson. They mentioned the strike. It was in the middle of the strike. And they were like,
podcasting is such a gray area because it's a little bit of promotion, which falls under SAG, and it's a little bit of journalism, which doesn't.
Where are we on that scale?
none of us
are SAG members. None of us are members of the WGA.
Okay.
If I
once auditioned for Colbert, that's as far as I got into the WGA.
Had I gotten my WGA card, I probably would have to sit out this one. So sorry, but hey, in the end, it's all for the best because this show must go on. But yeah, none of us are. FYI, none of us are associated with SAG, AFTRA, or the WGA, nor the AMPTP. So we're not. We have no bones in this broth. Nothing. Yeah, nothing. We're just a bunch of fans talking about it.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are on the billionaire side either, though.
No, because remember they were talking about for the last few conventions, there were a lot of cosplayers, just regular cosplayers again, who are not members of any of the unions, and they were being told that they can't cosplay as anything because I'm like, what? Why? They're not scabbing. They're not taking anybody's job. They're just dressing up in a costume for a convention. I don't know.
It's because the companies use pictures of them at conventions as free publicity.
Yeah.
And like, look at all these guys dressed as Venom. Go see Venom.
No, but still,
I know, and you're right. It's these guys using their own time, their own money.
And it's fandom. I mean, you're telling me now I can't be a fan and display my fandom? That's. I'm sorry. I'm sure there are people there are folks out here there who have very strong opinions about that.
And of course, comics are not covered by the WGA, so these characters are going to continue to appear in print with no pause in publication.
Right, and there are comic book writers who are like, they need to do their jobs. They might have jobs in also working in television or whatever, but their comic book contracts are not covered by any of this.
No, so like Neil Gaiman can't talk about Good Omens season 2, but he could do a new Sandman comic if he wanted to.
Right.
He just couldn't talk about Sandman season 2 on Netflix.
And it's on. And speaking of, there is an actual Good Omens comic book in production right now on Kickstarter that Neil Gaiman is writing, and Colleen Doran's doing the artwork for it. Apparently, that baby's already approached $2 million on Kickstarter as far as fund. It's way past the targets for funding. So
they should take that money and just do a season 3, because as much as I love Neil Gaiman's writing, if he makes a book or a comic out of it, it's not going to be David Tennant and Michael Sheen saying those lines.
No, it's not. But at the same time, you can't, right? You can't produce anything right now. Can't do. And plus, $2 million is nothing compared to what it would take
for a comic.
For a comic, yes.
A comic doesn't make $2 million.
No, but I will say I think Colleen Doran's long overdue getting paid for a job. She's long overdue for the stardom that she should have gotten a long time ago. Anyway, but that's an aside. We're getting way off the track as far as Spider-Man goes.
Let's just do. What about the getting back onto this particular movie? So hopefully, as the brandy begins to fade and the espresso begins to kick in. The travel aspect is really different. This is mentioned the John Hughes. This is kind of the National Lampoon's European Vacation of MCU movies.
They even use the same song in the very beginning. Yep.
So it's very different. I don't think we really have a vacation theme. And
there's precedent in the comics for Spider-Man traveling. There's precedent in the comics for Spider-Man doing anything, because at the very least, Marvel Team Up would have him meet every other character in the Marvel universe, and usually he would just do what they do. But there are classic stories of Spider-Man going to England and London, but it's not a key part of the character, so it stretches it. But then again, they do it in a believable way. Like, I do believe this is a study group that is getting to go abroad for the summer.
Yeah. It made me think, you mentioned Marvel 2-in-1, because I remember that issue of Marvel 2-in-1 when Spider-Man, Peter Parker goes to Los Angeles to cover a story for the Daily Bugle, and he meets up with Angel, who at that point is a member of the Champions, not the X-Men. But Warren Worthington is the leader of the Champions. And the first
is like Hercules, Ghost Rider, and Black Widow. It's a crazy team that did not work.
Did not work, but man, I love that team, because then he's out there and he's like, Peter Parker's like, 90 degrees in January. Oh, no wonder I'm going to get a cold now. that was the first time I was like, wait a minute, it gets warm in California in the winter? What? That's how young I was when I read that. But to the point where, yes, it's Peter Parker just going around and that little thing, that fish out of water type deal. Some kid from the Queens, even in Los Angeles, it was like a bit much for him. Yeah.
That first hotel in Venice is just great. That's your class trip hotel there. Of like, it's literally under the Alta Aqua. It's sinking into the lagoon.
And there's so many Marvel Easter eggs there. There's a lot of signs in Venice that are named after prominent Spider-Man writers. Dan Slott, Brian Michael Bendis, David Michelinie, Jim DeMatteis. All of them have like signs around the neighborhood.
Anyone with an Italian last name is getting, I guess.
Well, DeMatteis is the name of the hotel.
Yeah.
And Jan DeMatteis has been on Caffeinated Comics and absolutely an Italian-American New Yorker. So fantastic guy and a fantastic writer. So anytime I see his name, it's a joy.
You got to see if we can get him to talk about Craven, since he did write the famous Craven's Last Hunt.
Oh, well, we haven't. You know what? I should rerun that episode because we talked about that the first time he's on the show. And God, it must be 7-8 years ago now.
Yeah, that'll be next up, folks, on Caffeinated Comics. Well, okay. So my thing here now, I feel like just like we are now with the writer's strike, and we're going to be going into, there's going to be this weird, as you mentioned, Tom, this weird phase.
It's called the plague.
Yeah, well, the plague is going to do some things. I mean, and the writer's strike is also going to be affecting Marvel Productions. We're not going to see it probably for a bit. It's funny how movie studios are trying to act like business as usual. They made an announcement that Donald Glover and his brother are going to be doing a Lando series for Disney Plus. Deadpool. I mean, although Deadpool 3 has stopped production, they keep showing images from the set. Rumors going around about that. I myself am trying to see. Oh, I think I did. Captain America, Brave New World finish production, or was it stopped? I can't remember. One of them. There's one Marvel movie that actually finished production before the strike.
I think Captain America is the next one up. I haven't heard. I know Harrison Ford's in it, so that's the one that's gotten the most amount of conversation.
Yeah. And I that's probably, I foresee him being in like maybe 10, 15 minutes. Maybe like to the level that Robert Redford was.
Well, I just find it weird they said he's playing Thunderbolt Ross, so they're recasting William Hurt, who passed away. I just feel like he's Harrison Ford. You can just give him another character.
Who would you put in there?
I don't know, Henry Peter Gyrick.
Oh, Gyrick, though's got a lot of baggage.
That's the point. He's not a well-liked character by the other characters, but he's memorable.
I'm just wondering where going forward, because now we've got Loki coming up, right? Loki
season 2. Yeah. We have Loki season 2 and Ahsoka. I think that's all we got because Andor was shut down in the middle of production.
Right. And then Marvel, outside of, and then I think, Deadpool 3 was supposed to be the lead off to in 2023 for the big Marvel year. I mean, they were going to make it May. Captain America was originally supposed to be the May Marvel movie. That got shifted for Deadpool 3.
Right. And don't forget, we had, before the strike, we had Bob Iger saying that Disney was going to slow down and things were going to get pushed back because they've been stretched so thin, especially with the Disney shows, that interest is starting to wane. I mean, how long has it been since our last MCU podcast?
Yeah.
It's hard to keep that enthusiasm up when you're not getting the quality you were getting. So they were starting to push stuff back and pace stuff out. And, series become movies become series. But yeah, the strikes don't help anything.
Friends become enemies. Enemies become friends.
Brother against brother. Civil War.
I mean, I don't see anything wrong with them going back to 2 movies a year. I mean, they were pushing it. I mean, they were trying to do 3 there for a bit. And like, nah, give me 2. Heck, give me 1 Marvel movie a year.
Once I'd be fine with 1 summer, 1 Christmas, Christmas being a lesser one, and 2 series a year. Because I like the fact that the series focus on characters that can't sustain a movie. Like the Halloween Werewolf by Night special was a lot of fun. We'll probably never see Werewolf by Night ever again, but we did it.
And and Disney's talking about, well, they want to start cutting back, but they have this screwy release schedule. Haunted Mansion in the middle of summer? Why didn't they push that back to Halloween? Wouldn't it?
Because it worked so well the last time.
But the Eddie Murphy movie did fairly.
Eddie Murphy movie bombed very hard. They
Or
put out,
an Eddie Murphy movie, yes.
they put out Pirates of the Caribbean. Haunted Mansion followed Pirates of the Caribbean, and then it bombed so hard they made Pirates of the Caribbean too. The idea was they were going to make like every movie as a ride, so we probably would have gotten like a Small World movie. But then the first one, Haunted Mansion, tanked. And you know what? The Last Voyage of the Demeter tanked, a Dracula movie in August.
Yeah, which again
You're right.
makes no sense. But move it to Halloween, but toward the fall. That's when people want to see vampire movies. That's why that's when your next Paranormal Activity is going to come out. When your next, what's it, the Haunting or Insidious or whatever, the next Saw movie. It's all.
They were saying the same thing about the it's called Renfield, the Nicolas Cage.
Oh yeah, that sucked.
Yeah, it came out a few months ago, and people were saying this, like, why are you releasing this?
Yeah,
whatever, the spring or the summer? Make this.
They dumped that on Peacock, and when I watched it, I was like, oh, I see. It had every reason to bomb.
Yeah,
but even people go to see crappy horror movies around Halloween all the time. I mean, let's be honest. Not every horror movie is a jump scare great film. Some of them are like, but it's
no, Gen Xers grew up in the era where every horror movie was a piece of crap.
Well, yeah, so keep it, and they make money. They make money because it's that time of the year. I'll go see a scary movie approaching Halloween. Sure, that's why I think there's always this disconnect for these movie studio executives. Like they think, well, it didn't do well because the movie sucked. They're like, look at all the stuff that sucks that still makes money because of when you release it. You have to learn when people are in the mood for that kind of thing. Hey, I love Thai food, but maybe I didn't want it on a Monday. I'll be in the mood for it on Friday.
I actually did eat Thai food today on a Monday.
Shut up. I actually want Thai food. God damn it, Tom.
Oh God, I've done it again. But
still, and again, we'll go back to this whole thing about people not wanting to go to movies,
unless it's Barbie.
Unless it's Barbie and Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer's $650 million now.
Yeah.
So it's not that people don't want to go to the films. It's just they're getting people in the mood. The marketing is catching people at the right time, and they're like, yeah, let's make it an event. I want to go see. I'm going to do the Barbenheimer thing. I'll go see Barbie one day, and I'll see Oppenheimer the next. Dave, did you do that?
I saw Oppenheimer a Friday night, and then my wife and I saw Barbie the following afternoon. So within 24 hours, although not. So
you did the Oppenheimer. You didn't do
the reverse.
I just know I want to watch Oppenheimer in my living room. I know it's a movie that I'm going to really enjoy and want to pause. So, but we did go to Barbie last week, and it's fantastic.
Which brings me to my next point, a segment that I'd like to introduce in future episodes and things that we would like to ask our viewing audience. Let's talk about the rewatchability factor here. So with all these movies, I mean, the Marvel Studios has released a shit ton of movies. And let's be honest, there are some that we've loved and some maybe not so much. Some that we've watched them once and that's more than enough. Eternals. Or some that we like watching again and again and again. So on a rewatchability scale from 1 to 10, Spider-Man Far From Home. John, we're going to start with you. I'm sure I already know your answer.
I'm going to give it a 7 because I had a lot of fun watching it today. I've watched it many times. But if I'm going to reach for a Spider-Man movie, it's not my first reach. I'll probably go No Way Home or Homecoming or Spider-Man 2 before I go Far From Home. But after I've seen those again, I'll put it on. No, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is not a good analogy. But, it's like after your favorites is always good to watch. I don't know that this is anybody's favorite.
Dave?
Yeah, I would say 7 or 8. It's one of the things that it has going for it is it doesn't drag. It's also not one. It feels like it's one of the last of the more recent Marvel movies that's not almost 3 hours long. There was a stretch for a while there where it was like every single movie was like 2 hours and 35 minutes or 2 hours and 40 minutes. This one's like just over 2 hours. So really without the credits and everything, it's like just around 2 hours. So, which is, I think, the sweet spot for a comic book movie. So that's part of it as well. But yeah, for all the reasons John mentioned, I think it's not, it wouldn't be my go-to Spider-Man film to watch, but it's certainly an enjoyable one.
Tom?
I'm gonna go to the little higher on the end of the spectrum. I'm gonna go with an 8 or 9. Like, I think it's eminently rewatchable. I agree that it's not when I'm ordering up a Spider-Man movie, it's not my first choice. But I don't know if that affects how rewatchable it is on its own merits. I think the dialogue is still very crisp. The scenes are, when they're trying to be funny, it's funny. The action sequences have some stakes in them, even if they're not necessarily enormous stakes, and they don't fall into the trap that some comic book movies go, where the action sequences go on too long. They're able to keep it nice and crisp and stop it when it needs to be stopped. So even though this is batting further down in the order on my list of Spider-Man movies, I don't think that it's any less rewatchable. I'm sure this is somebody's favorite Spider-Man movie. It may not be mine or John or Dave's or Elliot's, but it's somebody's.
I would score it the same as you guys, but I'm going to be honest. I'm going to deduct a point, and I'm going to blame Disney for it. They're conditioning us to find everything on streaming, and the fact that they are making these films difficult to find on streaming, it just affects whether you watch it again. Also, we have this whole thing where Disney is going to start phasing out physical media. They're going to be releasing fewer and fewer films on Blu-ray, DVD, 4K. They're going to lean heavily into you wanting to get a Disney Plus subscription, or even buying it digitally and have that sucker in your cloud. I know the announcement recently, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is probably going to be the last of the Marvel movies that we know is going to have a Blu-ray release. They might decide to not, go further than that, because again, they're pushing. There's expense in production, and it's easier for them to just say, "Hey, buy it digitally, buy it from your streamer, have it in your cloud." I pray to Jeebus that they don't do that for Dial of Destiny. I need to have Dial of Destiny on Blu-ray. They have already cut off sales of the Dial of Destiny soundtrack on CD. You could only buy it through Disney Music Emporium, and after a month of it being available for pre-order, you can no longer order the Dial of Destiny soundtrack on CD. You can stream it online. You can't order it. You can't get a physical copy. So that's my roundabout way of saying that Disney's going to start affecting whether I want to watch certain things depending on what streaming service I can find it on. And unfortunately, Far From Home is going to get a nicked for that. Let's see, Marvel fanfare. The set. Ash Williams, Joe Biden. I'm trying to find the reference point.
I think it's when we were talking about Marvel team-ups.
Yes, Marvel team-ups. I used to love, especially Marvel fanfare, the Savage Lands. You had Spider-Man and the X-Men in the Savage Land. It was a 4-issue mini done for Marvel Fanfare magazine. The first 2 issues were drawn by Michael Golden, my all-time favorite Marvel artist, followed by Paul Smith, who would do the next 2. And they've actually collected that story into a trade paperback, which I luckily have. But those issues of Marvel Fanfare fetch a hefty penny right now in the secondary market. All right. We're approaching the hour-and-a-half mark. Any closing thoughts on Spider-Man Far From Home? Let's lead off with you, Dave.
Just probably summing up everything I've said already. It's a nice breezy movie, nice kind of smaller story that focuses on the characters, on a smaller cast of characters. A great villain in Mysterio. Some cool Easter eggs with, as Tom mentioned, some they find a way to cleverly work in some of the B-list Spider-Man villains. Again, not my favorite of the trilogy, but still still an enjoyable film in its own right. It's like, if you're ranking the Star Wars trilogy, the original one, even whatever you rank as the third, is still a great movie. So you can't go wrong with this one, I'd say.
Tom?
I'd say give it another shot. If maybe you watched it once when it came out and then you kind of left it alone. There's a lot that we haven't even talked about. We talked for an hour and a half about this movie, and we didn't even get to Jon Favreau dating Aunt Lisa Marie in this movie. So we didn't even get to that. So there's a lot going on in this movie. I would push back a little on the idea that it's lighter, because it does have a lot of heaviness and a lot of weight in some important places. But give it another shot if you've been sleeping on this for a while.
John?
As much as I've talked about how this is not the classic Spider-Man movie, but it is good, I really appreciate its ties to the MCU. I think one thing we didn't get to is that making Mysterio a disgruntled Stark employee, I felt worked really well, and then tying in Peter Billingsley from the first one, it made much more sense as an origin than the comics, where it's like Mysterio was a special effects guy who got fired and just robbed banks. I loved that it tied into Civil War with the imaging, that it did it in the way the comics did it. It just made the universe feel bigger, but it didn't make me feel like, oh, I have to have seen Civil War before I saw this. And I feel like Marvel should take a lesson from that, because they do get sucked into this. They get sucked into this, not so much where you have to have seen the last one to understand this one. I feel like they don't do that as much as every new one's going to have a few scenes that don't make any sense of the story, because we want to talk about something else. And I think the only time we do that in this movie is Nick Fury and the Skrulls. So it's nicely self-contained, which is a harder and harder thing to say about the Marvel Universe lately.
And there are two things, again, with this film. Enjoyable, yes. But there are two things that it promised that it didn't pay off. Of course, Nick Fury being in space with Skrulls, that you get no payoff in Secret Invasion. And that fun scene when Spider-Man stops those crooks and he's telling the cops, I'm here, I'm doing this because someone's got to do your job, appears in the trailer, but not in the movie. And again, I showed the trailer while we weren't on air. So look it up. We'll post it on the Facebook page.
So you didn't show that scene either?
Yeah, I didn't show
you
it.
and the theatrical version have that in common.
Yeah, both, everything. It's just been one of those evenings, I'm telling you. Anyway, well, as always, we want to thank you, Susan, Polar Knights, Ash Williams, Joe Biden, everyone who watched us on the Facebook stream, everyone who's watching us on YouTube and Twitch. Whether you're watching us live, whether you're watching this video as part of the archive, remember, if you go to the MCU ReVU page, YouTube page, click on the live tab to see all the episodes that we have live streamed in this show, starting with Iron Man. If you go just to the main page, you're going to get a blank screen that says this page has no content. That is a lie. There's lots of content. You just got to click on the live page. And if you're listening to us as part of the Caffeinated Comics series on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network, make sure to subscribe to Radio Misfits so you can get not only MCU ReVU, but all the other topics that we cover on the show, whether it's myself talking to John, or that John is talking to Stephen Brown, or one of his many guests that he has on to discuss the topics going on in pop culture. So before we sign off, where can we see y'all on the socials, Tom?
Well, you can find the espresso martini that we did this week and all the drinks that we do for the MCU review and the Top Men Indiana Jones podcast at REVU Cocktails on the Instagram app. And maybe next week I'll throw up a Vesper there. We'll do something James Bondy at some point too.
Sounds good, Dave.
I am on Instagram at Pinto_Noir.
We should follow you because
I gave a tease of it earlier in the show. My little goblin of a dog, Dexter.
Sometimes
he makes an appearance on the show.
Yeah, it's about time. Your cats have made several appearances. It was time for Dexter. Dexter. John.
I'm on Not in My Book on Instagram, and I have started Threads. I have posted nothing, but I'm on Threads. And when they get a desktop version, I'll probably start posting. And I was on Twitter, but then Twitter became X, and now I'm X Twitter.
John, I've been meaning to ask you, what is the significance of your Instagram handle, the name?
That's a good story. It was actually a sketch I wrote for my friend Howie Weingartner, who's on the show a lot. It was about a book club where no matter what book it was, there was a guy that yelled, "Not in my book," and he always had a copy of his book written by him. Like his Lord of the Rings was about a guy that was eating all the pretzel rings that he could in 80 days. And I think I chose that as my AOL handle around the time I wrote the sketch. I've just never changed it.
Okay.
Works. And I am Elliot Serrano with 2 L's, 2 T's, and 2 R's. You'll find me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads. I have been posting on Threads. I did post a link to my most recent stint hosting on WCPT Radio, where I got to talk to Missa Kate of NWA Wrestling, one half of the tag team champions. So you can follow me on Threads, Twitter, Instagram, all those things, where you'll not only find links to the MCU review, but as Thomas mentioned, the Indiana Jones podcast called Top Men. And at some point, Shaken Not Heard will be returning. I'm afraid, though, with the writer's strike and all that, they're probably going to be pushing back anything because nothing can happen. Nothing can be developed right now with all that going on. So hopefully by the end, I have this feeling we're going to hear something by the end of the year. I just have this feeling. I want to say Christmas, December, something.
That's when Bond movies used to come out, so that would be appropriate.
Yeah, but just a cool, like an announcement. Would be kind of cool. All right. Well, for John Clark, Dave Pinto, Tom Jutner, I am Elliot Serrano. Thank you so much for joining us today on MCU Review. Join us next time when we will be. Wait, are we talking about a movie or are we going to go into this television series now? I think WandaVision's next, if I remember correctly.
I think it is. As we said, we don't have anything till Eternals, so it would be WandaVision.
Yeah, let's put off Eternals then. I'm not anxious to see that.
I don't know that I want to see it twice.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time. Until then, be safe, be good to each other. Please like, share, subscribe, tell us what you think. We'll be back talking about WandaVision on the next MCU review. Good night, folks.